This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
We are back with David Smith, our owner and therapist of Thriving Family Therapy. Excited to talk about his therapy practice, which is online across 5 states. He offers neurodiversity affirming coaching and training businesses nationwide. Please welcome back to the show. How are you today, David?
Thanks, Jill. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, thanks. And excited you're back with us, joining us again. This is our podcast number 2, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, let's get
back.
a little refresher. For those that may not know who you are, what you do, give us a little overview about Thriving Family Therapy, please, before we begin.
Of course. So my name is David Smith. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, licensed or with telehealth registrations in Oregon, California, Idaho, Florida, and Vermont. Kind of a random collection of states, but physically located in Southern Oregon. I also do clinical supervision for therapists in training. I started my private practice about 2 years ago and have developed a specialization in working with people with autism, ADHD, those who are facing professional or artistic burnout, chronic stress, especially caregivers, healthcare professionals, teachers, other people who just deal with really stressful situations all the time, and people with complicated families. And as a clinical supervisor, my passion is helping neurodivergent therapists and those who want to work with neurodivergent populations gain more expertise and training in that area. Recently, I started a new area of focus, helping provide consultation and training and other forms of coaching to therapists, healthcare professionals, employers, educators, and businesses in how to be more neurodiversity affirming and improve their ability to support and help people with autism, ADHD, and other conditions. Because it's a tough world out there. And a lot of times people don't know how to help.
Beautiful.
So that's what I do.
Great. And we're excited that you're back. And I know for today's show, we're going to get a little refresher on exactly what neurodivergence is and neurodiversity affirming and autism, ADHD. Let's get a little, of the info and maybe talk about some of the common misunderstandings, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be useful. So neurodiversity is a term that is relatively new within the past 15 or 20 years. And it embraces the idea that things like autism and ADHD are not necessarily disorders or mental illnesses or developmental disabilities, although at their extremes they can be very disabling. They're differences. The human neurological system and the human neurotypes are very diverse. Autism and ADHD are 2 particular patterns that happen normally within the human neurotype. They're differences. I think of autism in particular sort of like a spice mix, like garam masala or za'atar or tajin, depending on your culture. Certain common ingredients that go into the recipe, but every household has their own particular mix that they use, different proportions, and they can either sprinkle it on just a little bit to add some zest, or they put it on really heavily and it dominates the dish. Autism could be like that. So I am autistic myself. Didn't know that until a year ago at age 56. I'm older than I look. It was quite a discovery to finally find that out. It was actually my clients, my autistic clients, who were calling me out on it, as well as my wife, who's a psychotherapist and has an autistic brother. They kept saying, you have some features yourself. Maybe you should look at this. At that point, I'd been working with autistic people for 8 or 9 years and had never really seriously considered it. I don't have that. I have more of the sprinkling for a little bit of zest. I'm what we would call high masking or low support needs as an autistic person. But it's definitely a feature of my life and explained a lot. There are others who are much more heavily impacted. And it can be anywhere from level 1, which is what I have, to level 3, which is the classic picture that many of us have as a stereotype of what autism looks like. Someone who is nonverbal or barely verbal, has a lot of differences in their behavior, does a lot of stimming, struggles with social connection, does not make eye contact, and so on. It could be variable, but there are certain common ingredients. ADHD is similar. Some people are relatively lightly impacted by it. For some people, it dominates their life. Neurodiversity encompasses the idea that many people have these differences in how we are wired. It can be a disability. For others, it's simply a feature of their experience of the world that has a major impact. The idea of neurodiversity affirming is a huge shift in how we look at people who are autistic, have ADHD, epilepsy, dyslexia, dyscalculia, the other forms of neurodivergence. Rather than looking at them as disorders, as dysfunctions, as things that are broken in that person, they are features of their life that affect their experience of the world. And neurodiversity affirming care works with those people to better understand how their nervous system works, how that has affected their experience, and how to develop strategies, skills, and support networks that will allow them to live a more healthy, happy, peaceful life in whatever form that takes for them. It's a huge paradigm shift, and it's one that I personally am very passionate about.
Got it. Well, also, I just want to, point out that, there's a lot of different issues that neurodivergent people really face in trying to navigate the world, right? And I want to talk about some of that as well, their mental health, physical health, and then get into a little bit about what it's like to actually be an autistic therapist, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting experience. Neurodivergent people tend to have a pretty difficult experience in the world to a greater or lesser degree. It's not set up for them. There are certain expectations in society from holding a job, having relationships, having friends, being able to just go out and walk the streets or go into a stadium for a concert. Just basic things that we expect from people living in this culture, in this time, that can be more or less stressful for people with a different neurotype. So in autism and ADHD both, sensory sensitivities are very common. In autism, it's actually one of the diagnostic features. Certain things that are just massively overstimulating and very difficult to deal with. Social difficulties are common. Autistic people tend to not clearly get some of the social rules in the same way that a neurotypical person would necessarily do. For example, if someone frowns at them in a conversation, often autistic people, especially children, will assume that person is angry at them or hates them. That's just the automatic assumption. That frowny face means they're mad. May not consider the fact that person may have a headache, maybe thinking about someone else, maybe trying really hard to understand. Those little frowny lines on your forehead can mean a lot of things. But the autistic mind struggles to process nonverbal communication and vocal tone in the same way that a neurotypical person would. Going into certain settings can be extremely hard. A busy classroom where the kids are just bouncing all over the place can freak out someone who is neurodivergent, and they either melt down or shut down. The common experience is stress. And the world is just an extremely confusing, stressful, overwhelming place to be. And so for many neurodivergent people, one of the core challenges in life is to find a way to navigate this complicated world we live in a way that helps them feel safe and supported and calm. Because, we all have this window of tolerance for stress. There's only so much we can deal with. It varies by person, it varies by day. Just think about how you feel when you're well rested, you've had a good meal, you've had wonderful time, people you're working with are kind and welcoming. You're going to be able to deal with a lot more than on a day when you've gotten 3 hours of sleep, you had an argument with your loved ones in the morning, you're late to work, you didn't get a good meal, your window of tolerance is much narrower. People who are neurodivergent, as well as those with a lot of trauma, tend to have much more narrow windows of tolerance for stress, and they're more fragile. And so when the amount of energy going through your system, stress can be either, something we would think of as stressful or even excitement. When that energy exceeds your window of tolerance, one of two things is going to happen. Any electrician can tell you this. Either the breaker's going to trip and you shut down, or it's going to burn out, fire. So meltdown or shutdown. That's the common experience of people who are neurodivergent. As an autistic therapist, I didn't know I was dealing with autism until last year, as I said. I just knew that life was really hard. And I went through a lot of periods where I was just chronically overstressed, had many episodes of what I would now label as autistic burnout, where I just collapsed. And I had to work really hard to develop the skills to manage this life. And having that experience really informs the work that I do with my client population. I'm not a white lab-coated expert teaching people how to deal with their disorders. That's not the way I approach things. I am a fellow traveler, following a much more Jungian wounded healer kind of model, where I'm walking a lot alongside the people I'm working with as someone who's experienced this before. And we work together to explore ways that can make life more bearable and create a safe, protected space where they feel supported and calm as much as possible.
Beautiful. And by the way, if anyone does want to call in, have any questions as we continue the conversation, you can reach us today at 631-307-4031. That's 631-307-4031. And you can ask our expert licensed clinical social worker anything. Let's continue. Where do we head next?
A lot of the work that I do work with a lot of autistic people and those with ADHD, especially those who either were diagnosed late in life. I've worked with people as old as in their 70s who are just now confronting the idea that they might have been autistic all this time and never known it, or who were diagnosed as children and never really got effective help. So that's a big part of my client base. A lot of the others that I work with are parents, grandparents, caregivers, who have someone in their life that they love deeply who has neurodiversity as part of their picture, and they don't know how to support them properly. There's a particular profile of autism that some of the parents that I work with and caregivers deal with called PDA, pervasive demand avoidance, pathological demand avoidance, or pervasive drive for autonomy, depending on whether you want to use more embracing or pathological language. PDA shows up as anxiety provoked by any external demand. These are the kids where you cannot get them to brush their teeth. It's difficult to get them out the door to go to school. If you ask them to do something, they automatically will say no. When you're dealing with someone who's neurodivergent, this is not the same thing as oppositionality. It's not defiance. It's not willful. What's happening is that they have a very strong need for autonomy and control. And anything that threatens that provokes a threat response, fight, flight. They're feeling anxiety. They're resisting not because they want to drive you crazy. They're resisting because that demand, that expectation from the outside world becomes a source of stress. And so they resist in order to maintain control. It's a really difficult pattern to parent because you can't get them to do anything. It's a battle every time you're trying to get them out the door to go to school. PDA is not really well recognized within the US. It's better recognized in the UK. It's not very well researched yet. It's not clear whether it's a specific subtype of autism or if it's its own neurotype that's separate. Dealing with it is challenging. So one of the areas that I've been working on more and more is helping parents and caregivers and people with PDA themselves. I identify as one. Mine is internalized. It doesn't show up as rebellion. It's just procrastination and just not facing the things that I even need to do. Even when you want to do the thing, the expectation and the demand is stressful. I work with these people, the individuals and those around them, to figure out ways to reduce demands, offer more autonomy and control,
Yeah.
and use what's called low demand parenting or peaceful parenting,
Yeah.
whether that's for your actual child or for yourself. How do you reduce the amount of demand that you are facing? How do you give yourself more autonomy and control? And how do you be more gentle and compassionate with yourself or with the person that you love? It's complicated. With a lot of these people, and this is true with autism and ADHD and a lot of other forms of neurodivergent people, traditional forms of parenting not only don't work, they tend to backfire.
Yeah.
And parents of these children get a lot of really judgmental advice. You just need firm boundaries. You got to give consequences. Where are your limits? Why
Yeah.
are you spoiling that kid? What's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
It's a terrible thing. Our
Yeah.
society doesn't understand it. So for parents who are dealing with this kind of pattern, and grandparents in a lot of cases, I work with a lot of grandparents who are raising children, figuring out how to reframe the parenting that they're taught by society and that they experienced in their own childhood, and figure out something that works and actually helps that child be more successful in life is a big part of what we do.
Ah. Well, also, I mean, you really, there are some cutting edge issues and topics that I know
Mm-hmm.
in the neurodiversity affirming therapy and healthcare. We're going to talk about that and,
Mm-hmm.
talk about some of the resources out there. But really, if anyone out there is neurodivergent, has a family member, needs any help, this is important. And I hope you guys reach out to Thriving Family. So in the
Yeah.
meantime, I just want to point out that the lines are still open. If you have any questions, 631-307-4031. 631-307-4031. Please feel free to give us a call and have a discussion because, you're here to help. Thank you.
Yeah. There is a lot of good information out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bad information out there as well, but a lot of what I do when I'm working with families is help connect them to information that will help them. I've developed a lot of my own resources. I do a lot of teaching. We call it psychoeducation in the therapy world. Um, I am famous for going into professor mode at times, to the point where I tell my clients, if I'm going into professor mode and your eyes are glazing over, tell me and I'll redirect. But I love sharing knowledge and information because there is good stuff out there. One of my favorite resources is a website called Neurodivergent Insights. The creator of that, Dr. Megan Anna Neff, is a clinical psychologist who herself identifies as autistic and ADHD, and she's just a treasure trove of good information about many, many different topics. There are a bunch of podcasts that I listen to regularly. Hers is one, Divergent Conversations, which she co-hosts with Patrick Casal, who's another clinical social worker and also autistic and ADHD. And they do a beautiful job of humanizing the experience and giving both deep knowledge and also a lot of personal stories that share their own experience living this way in a very vulnerable way. And there are tons of others. For PDA, Sally Cat, person in the UK, herself a PDAer, has some really great information about PDA. And there's a lot of stuff out there that you can find if you know where to look. More and more people are showing up on YouTube. One of the big barriers also is that getting diagnosed, especially as an adult, is really hard. It's expensive. Insurance often doesn't pay for it. There are not very many, there are more all the time, but there are not very many psychologists or psychiatrists who really are familiar with diagnosing, especially high masking or low support needs adults. They're more focused on children. So increasingly in the neurodivergent world, and yes, it is a community, the idea of self-discovery, self-diagnosis is very widely accepted. Now, if you need accommodations at work or you're applying for disability, yes, you do need the official medical diagnosis. But if you explore the ideas that you might be autistic or might have ADHD and it fits, you do the online tests, some of them are great, some of them are not. but you read a lot of the material and you start exploring the people who talk about it, and you feel like it fits. Welcome, you're probably one of us. You don't need some, white-coated person to bless you and say, yeah, you're autistic, unless you want official accommodations. That's how a lot of people are coming to me these days. They're saying, I suspect I might be autistic. I've gone to therapy over and over again for years with many different people. None of it really fit. I got a better and better understanding of why I am the way I am, but it didn't change what happens. And they come to me because they finally decide that maybe I should see an autism specialist and someone who actually has lived this experience. And we tend to make a lot of progress very quickly, just in normalizing what they've dealt with all their lives. It's a beautiful process when it works.
And, there's so many, people out there who also, are, professionals, right? That are not
Mm-hmm.
specialists though in autism
Right.
ADHD, but they do work with people that are neurodivergent. But
Yeah.
really, it's always good to go to someone who obviously does have training in this, who actually is a part of the community in a sense, and really can empathize and understand. And
Yeah.
what would you say that, some of the resources are for out there for people?
Well, you raise a good point, Jill. A lot of the referrals I get uh, for my clients are coming from other therapists or healthcare professionals who kind of tune into the idea that this person might be autistic, or they might have ADHD, or they've just been diagnosed. And that therapist, that doctor, that nurse practitioner says you should see an autism specialist. That is one answer. And I value those referrals. They've been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
There are not enough of us. And I and most of the other autism specialists I know are not only full, we have wait lists that can be anywhere from 3 months to a year before we can get someone as a client. Bless you. Referring out is not always the best answer. Let's say that you're a therapist, you've been working with someone for
Mm-hmm.
6 months, a year, and now the issue of their autism has suddenly come up. Rather than referring them out to someone like me, which could take a long time and be hard to find, one of the things that I can offer, and I'm making more a part of my practice, is consultation to help you as a doctor, as a therapist, as a professional, an educator, an employer, get some consultation and brief training in how to better support this person. Because a lot of times a therapist knows a lot about what to do to help people. They
Yeah.
simply may not know how to adapt that to deal with someone who's autistic. The standard of
Mm-hmm.
care for therapy in the US at least is CBT. It's kind of considered the gold standard. It's very effective for neurotypical people. The indications for autistic people are very mixed. And it can build insight, but it doesn't really create much change. So some brief consultation about how you can support that client and learn what you need to know to be more confident working with neurodivergent populations can help you retain that client, first of all, maintain the therapeutic relationship, and feel more solid in providing effective and affirming care. A lot of medical practices are really difficult places for neurodivergent people to go. Bright lights, very busy, very loud, very fast, not much relationship. You got an 8-minute appointment. How are you going to communicate everything that you need to do? Neurodivergent people have a lot of really complicated medical issues that don't fit well into a 8 to 15-minute medical appointment. And they leave feeling unsatisfied and not very helped.
Yeah.
How can a medical practice better support autistic people? How can you change your sensory environment to deal with people who just cannot go into that office and deal with all that noise and light? How can you change the way that you approach them and the way that you ask them questions and the expectations you have of them as a patient to be more supportive? How can you get them to come into your office for the care they need?
Yeah.
I work with oncology practices that struggle with this. I mean, you think about it, you're an autistic person with cancer, getting the chemotherapy and radiation that you might need to treat that condition is brutal on every level. And they tend not to come back. And I mean, this is not just a quality of care issue. This is a saving your life issue. So how do you make your practice more welcoming and more accommodating to people who have these kind of barriers to getting the care that will save their lives? It's one of the things that I'm focusing on more and more.
Beautiful. Well, I just, I want to commend you for being here, for doing the work you do. We still got 3 minutes left in the show. If someone does want to call in, please feel free. 631-307-4031. The lines are open. Let me just ask, with all this work that you're doing, could you share maybe a story in closing of, about someone that you've helped and how this process of
Mm.
you as a therapist has really helped change the life of someone who is neurodivergent?
It's I won't give one example, partly for confidentiality reasons. I'll give kind of a composite. Uh, Often I work with people who have struggled with trauma, depression, anxiety, and a sense that they don't fit in the world all their lives. I've had a couple clients in their 70s who are just now trying to confront the idea that the life they've been living has been brutally hard, and that some of the
Yeah.
coping mechanisms they have developed to deal with that have been adaptive at the time. They worked, they helped them survive, but they have outlived their purpose, and in some ways they're holding them back. And they're looking at the possibility that maybe they were not broken all along. Maybe they were just different. They've absorbed the idea, whether they're 40, 50, 60, 70, they've absorbed the idea all their lives that there was something broken about them, that they were flawed human beings. What if it was not that? What if they were just fine all along, and it was the world around them that was flawed? What if they could learn to embrace their true self, their inner self, as it always was, as this beautiful, innocent person who just had a complicated nervous system and whose needs were never met adequately all their lives, starting in infancy? What if they could drop all the pieces of their lives, all those pieces of armor that they've assembled that not only protect them, but also wall them in and shield them from life? What if they could just drop them on the floor and then spend some time looking at each one and figuring out which pieces still serve them, maybe in a different way? Maybe that piece needs to be shifted around to a new purpose. Maybe it can still be protective, but not isolating. Maybe there are pieces that they just need to leave on the floor and sweep out because they're holding them back more than they're helping. I've watched some of these people that I work with go from just barely surviving, just hanging on by their fingernails, to really thriving and stepping into a whole new sense of self that's just beautiful. It's a privilege to watch. And it makes me think of this Japanese art, kintsugi, where they take pieces of broken pottery, sometimes intentionally broken pottery, and seam it back together using gold as the bonding agent. And the piece of art that's created out of that is actually more beautiful than the original piece of pottery. And that's how I think about this process, that we are taking, I think Hemingway was the one who said, we are all broken by the world, but it's in the broken places that the light comes in. And that's the process we go through. How do we rebuild your life in a way that makes the best of your strengths and helps you work around the things that have held you back all this time?
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us, for being here, enlightening us again. Tell us the website, how we can reach out to you, please.
The website is thrivingfamilytherapy.com. My email address is david@thrivingfamilytherapy.com. I'm also on Facebook, Thriving Family Therapy. I'm on Instagram at Thriving Family Therapy. I'm also on Medium and Substack, although I don't post there as often as I like. Those are the main ways at this point.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us, and looking forward to the next time we connect. Thank you again, David. Enjoy.
This is the Global Podcast Network. where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.